يا
Believers, when an ungodly person brings to you a piece of news, carefully ascertain its truth, lest you should hurt a people unwittingly and thereafter repent at what you did. Know that Allah's messenger is among you. Were he to follow you in many an affair, you yourselves would suffer. But Allah has endeared faith to you and has embellished it in your hearts and has made unbelief and evildoing and disobedience abhorrent to you. Such are those who are rightly guided. By Allah's favor and bounty, Allah is all-knowing, all-wise. If two parties of the believers happen to fight, make peace between them. But then, if one of them transgresses against the other, fight the one that transgresses until it reverts to Allah's command. And if it does revert, make peace between them with justice, and be equitable, for Allah loves the equitable. Surely the believers are none but brothers unto one another. So set things right between your brothers, and have fear of Allah, that you may be shown mercy.
Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon on behalf of IPS, Chairman Khalid Rahman Saab and our Vice President Ambassador Syed Ibrahim Hussain, Excellency Salih Muhammad Ahmad Muhammad Siddiq, we welcome you most wholeheartedly for this brief meeting. You are our chief guest, and there is another keynote speaker, Mr. Sami Hamdi Al-Hashmi. He is the Director General of International Interest in UK. Excellency, all of us are worried about the situation in Sudan. Our embassy has been evacuated, as you know, as most embassies have been. And we would like to know your candid opinion of how the situation is going to resolve. How will the conflict resolve between the two generals? Because sincerely, we feel very strongly about Sudan. And also, I would like to mention the name of Ambassador Imran Yawar Saab also. He's extensively served in our missions in Africa. You just heard him in the lounge over there. So first of all, with your permission, sir, we will like to invite Mr. Sami Hamdi Al-Hashmi. Sami Hamdi is the Managing Director of the International Interest, a global risk and intelligence company. He advises government institutions, global companies, and NGOs on geopolitical dynamics of Europe and the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa region, and has significant expertise in advising on commercial issues related to volatile political environments. Abari, am I audible now? Okay. So I was introducing Mr. Sami Hamidi. He advises government, institutions, global companies, and NGOs on the geopolitical dynamics of Europe and MENA region, and has significant expertise in advising on commercial issues related to volatile political environment and their implications on market entry, market expansion, and management of stakeholders. Mr. Hamdi is a frequent guest on Al Jazeera, Arabic as well as English, Sky News, TRT World, and other outlets. And today he is our guest online. The floor is yours, Mr. Hamdi. What is your take on the situation in Sudan? Not audible, probably you'll have to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Greetings to Your Excellencies, greetings to the organizers. Thank you very much to the Institute of Policy Studies for hosting me and for hosting this very timely event. And greetings, of course, to everybody who's following this online via YouTube or other social media. I think the reality is that what's happening in Sudan now, Sudan has finally made the front pages of the news, given that it's been neglected significantly over the past years, during a period in which it desperately needed attention, particularly at a time in which it was navigating a very difficult transition. I think that there are the immediate reasons for the crisis, and then there are the contextual reasons for the crisis. The immediate reasons for the crisis are quite simple. In February, the army chief, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, announced that the Rapid Support Forces, which is an organization, an armed organization, that was established before, during the Omar al-Bashir's time when he was in power, that the Rapid Support Forces, which over the past 5 years has become an increasingly independent organization, were able to establish its own international agreements, receiving its own funding, with its leader, Mohammed Hamdan Doglo, otherwise known as Hemeti, being received internationally in his own capacity. General Abdel Fattah Burhan of the Sudanese army announced that this force led by Hemeti should be merged with the army. And the reaction of Hemeti has been to launch an attack on the Sudanese army, to launch an attack to prevent the merging, because, to put it quite bluntly, Hemeti believes that any merging of his forces with the Sudanese army would essentially result in the clipping of his wings or its significant diminishing of his power. Those are the immediate reasons, but there are contextual reasons regarding why this conflict has come about. In that, in last year, in December, there was an agreement that was brokered by international actors between the army and between a number of civilian parties. It was called Al-Ittifaq Al-Itari, the framework agreement. In January, General Abdel Fattah Burhan made an announcement saying that this framework agreement needed to include more civilian parties, essentially trying to dilute the influence of a group of civilian parties called the Forces for Freedom and Change, a group that is essentially made up of leftist, communist parties, and the Hizb al-Ummah, which is a party that was once led by the late Sadiq al-Mahdi, who was Prime Minister of Sudan in the late 1980s. Burhan said that this agreement should expand beyond these groups and should include civilian parties. There were questions as to why Burhan would insist on the inclusion of the civilian parties, but we won't necessarily go into that at the moment. And as a result, a meeting was held in Cairo in which there was an attempt to expand these civilian parties. It is at this point that there were suggestions that the civilian parties of the Forces for Freedom and Change that were expecting the transition to hand over all power to them were very frustrated at the inclusion of these extra civilian parties. So the rumors were that they were gathering around Hemeti. The suggestion was that Hemeti might be able to use his force in order to pressure Abdel Fattah al-Burhan to hand over power to them instead of expanding the civilian agreement. In order to understand the significance of that, we have to go back slightly further, in that it's important to stress, and I hesitate to say it in front of His Excellency, the ambassador of Sudan, in that when Omar al-Bashir was toppled in 2019, there were two prevalent narratives. The first narrative was one in which it was a Sudanese revolution, the people taking to the streets that toppled the regime, and that therefore we were embarking on a democratic transition. The second narrative, however, is the one that is prevalent amongst the political actors in Sudan and amongst the international actors, which is that Omar al-Bashir was toppled by US sanctions that lasted over 30 years. And as a result, it is not the Sudanese people who should dictate the transition, but rather the international powers that sanction Sudan. In other words, because Omar al-Bashir was toppled by sanctions, the international community is the one that dictates the terms for Sudan's rehabilitation. And one of the proof of that is that when you look at some of the measures that the Sudanese government or the Sudanese transition embarked on, such as normalization of ties with Israel, such as the suggestion of removing Islam from the constitution in a peace agreement signed with some of the rebel groups, these are policies that the Sudanese people would never democratically vote for. They would never give a democratic mandate for these initiatives, suggesting the only way they could have been implemented is by the imposition of these policies, the ideological imposition, as opposed to engaging with the Sudanese parties. And this is where we need to provide some context in terms of what happened. And I won't go on too long on this particular point. One of the things that's worth noting is that when you look at the Arab Spring movements, when you look at what happened in Tunisia, in Libya, in Egypt, when you look at what happened in some of these other areas, such as Spring, the beneficiaries of the Arab Spring were essentially the Islamist parties. In Sudan, after Omar al-Bashir was toppled, the suggestion was that if we go immediately to elections in Sudan, there is a risk that the same scenario will be repeated again, that elections are held, that Islamist parties come to power again with a democratic mandate. And therefore, there was an inclination in Sudan that instead of going towards elections, instead of repeating what happened in Tunisia, Libya, and Egypt in terms of the democratic elections, we should establish a negotiated transition that delays elections, that allows this transition to embark with ideological changes before we allow the Sudanese to choose. And this is why, instead of going to elections to establish a democratic mandate, what we had instead was an agreement between the civilian parties, the Forces for Freedom and Change, and between the army once more. Essentially, the parties that were concerned that they would not win elections, that were concerned that if they hold elections, they would be the one sidelined, decided instead to enter into an agreement with the army in order to negotiate this transition period. And as a result, we had this transition in which the army would lead for 2 years and there would be a civilian government, and then power would be handed towards a civilian government. The reason that context is important is because it explains why this transition agreement failed. When the 2 years passed and the time came to hand over power to the civilian parties, some of the Darfurians, such as Jibril Ibrahim, such as Minni al-Minnawi, two leaders who enjoyed sweeping international support in the 2000s. Jibril Ibrahim, who led his forces all the way to the gates of Khartoum in Durman in 2008, threatening the Sudanese regime before the peace agreement allowed for peace to reign in Sudan. Even Jibril Ibrahim and the Darfurians began to accuse the Forces for Freedom and Change that they were about to receive disproportionate power on the basis of a transition that had no democratic mandate. To put it more simply, Jibril Ibrahim and Minni al-Minnawi and other parties that were celebrated once by the international community began to say, why should the army hand over power to civilian parties that would never be able to win elections? And to put this into further context, the transition agreement gave 67% of the parliament appointed to these political parties, suggesting that they managed to take the state without ever going back to the Sudanese people. The reason I mention this point is to highlight that the Sudanese transition until now has not been about allowing the Sudanese to vote or choose their leaders, but has been a negotiated transition because of a wariness that the Sudanese people might choose wrongly, as the people in Tunisia chose wrongly, as the people in Libya chose wrongly, as the people in Egypt chose wrongly. And this is why when we put this now into context back to today in terms of the fighting, the reason that now we see the fighting in Sudan is because no one truly believes that the transition was about democracy. They believe the transition was about implementing the ideological changes that the international community desires in Sudan. That's why Hemeti has been appearing on Israeli channels, or his advisors have been appearing on Israeli channels, repeating the same rhetoric of we are fighting radical Islamists. We are fighting, these are guys who want to put these radical ideas that Israel has been fighting all this time. And note this particular point, that Hemeti, who has been an essential part of the transition process for the last 5 years, in his 5 years of working with international actors, in his 5 years of working with Volker, the international envoy, in his 5 years of working with Washington, working with the UAE, working with Saudi Arabia, working with the Sudanese civilian parties, Hemeti has come to the conclusion that this argument of fighting against Islamists and guaranteeing that Islamists will not come to power is the argument that the international community want to hear. Hemeti is deploying an argument that he has seen resonate amongst the international community. And the other thing that's worth noting is this, and it might be slightly controversial to say, in that when you look at the revolutions that took place in the region that sought to topple authoritarianism and establish democratic transitions, we saw that the opposition to these transitions were mainly led by an axis of the UAE, an axis of Saudi Arabia, an axis of Egypt afterwards when Sisi came to power. In other words, these powers did not celebrate any of the revolutions that took place in the Arab Spring. The only revolution that they celebrated was Sudan. So much so that the Saudi ambassador caused anger when he announced and said that but for Saudi Arabia, Omar al-Bashir would not have fallen. And many Sudanese people were upset with that because they truly believed that they had embarked on a revolution. Yasser Arman, who is one of the leaders of one of the armed groups, when he was asked about the role of the international players such as the UAE, he said there is no harm in relying or getting help from the UAE to topple the Islamists and to fight back against the Islamists. The point here is that what we're seeing unfold is not the decline of a democratic transition, because there was never necessarily a democratic transition taking place in Sudan. There was a negotiated transition. And this is why when we go back to Burhan, when he refused to hand over power to the civilian parties, what Burhan did, which was, in my opinion, a masterstroke, Burhan announced and essentially gave an ultimatum to the international community. Either you let me rule the same way you let Sisi rule, the same way you let other people rule in the region, or I will hold elections. Burhan announced in 2021 essentially that he would hold elections next year if he was forced essentially to hand over power to the civilian parties. And note the reaction of the international community. It was not, okay, let's go to elections. It was panic. It was, if Burhan is going to hold elections, this is not what we want, because we don't trust the result that these elections will deliver, given what we saw in Tunisia, what we saw in Libya, what we saw in Egypt. And that's why instead of pressuring Burhan, they entered into a new negotiations with the army with the sole purpose of trying to convince him not to hold elections. And this is why Burhan, the army chief, every time he's under pressure to hand over powers to these civilian parties that Sudanese are in consensus would not be able to win elections, Burhan says either I should rule or I will hold elections. And this is why Burhan has become problematic for the international community, and why the international community, instead of standing with the Sudanese army, instead of asserting the integrity of the state, instead of asserting the integrity of a national army, a national institution, they are instead pushing for a mediation between Hemeti and between Burhan, almost as if they are officializing the presence of two independent armed forces in the country. They are seeking to hold mediation in Riyadh, almost as if a repeat of Yemen, whereby the Houthis, who toppled the internationally recognized government, were officialized in the mediation as a legitimate party. And as a result, Yemen now is on the verge of being split between two different countries. The point here being is that while it's true that there is a lot of both-sidism, while it's true that there's an assertion that this is perhaps two factions fighting with one another, the crux of the issue has always been in Sudan that since the toppling of Omar al-Bashir, the international actors do not believe it was a revolution. They believe that the government was toppled by sanctions, and therefore the transition should be a negotiated one, not a democratic one. And this is where I enter the conclusion of my statement, because I know that the people probably want to hear more from the ambassador than they want to hear from me. But the point here being is that to conclude is this: the solution to Sudan requires a democratic mandate that cannot be challenged. That can only come via elections. Whatever you may say about Libya, about Egypt, about Tunisia, the reality is that the reason they were called democratic transitions is because there was a clear mandate. The issue in Sudan is not one of the army, it's not one of force, it's not one of the military. The issue in Sudan is the international community is not sure whether it can trust the Sudanese population to vote, and therefore they've embarked on supporting a transition that guarantees that the Sudanese will not vote incorrectly. And this is why at this moment in time, the civilian parties that stand to benefit from this transition, the civilian parties that took 69% of the parliament by negotiated agreement, and who in elections are unlikely to win 69% of the seats by any stretch of the imagination, they are more inclined today towards Hemeti pressuring the army than they are inclined towards supporting the Sudanese National Army and trying to restore a democratic transition. And to conclude, this is why what's happening in Sudan, the transition, has been one of an attempt at social engineering. And this is why the Sudanese people feel so aggrieved that despite embarking in popular protests and trying to demand a democratic transition of their own, the reality is that they feel that that has been hijacked by international actors that prefer to dictate the process of the transition, to dictate normalization with Israel, to dictate removing Islam from the constitution, to dictate these ideological changes before any move is made towards elections in Sudan. This is just a general context, but the crux of the issue is a very simple one. It's about, do we let the Sudanese vote? And the answer of the international community at the moment is, the Sudanese cannot be trusted. Let's delay it further and continue with this negotiated arrangement between our preferred political parties and the army, and we see where it goes from there. And now we're seeing that as a result, the power is not determined by mandate or elections. Power today is being determined by the barrel of the gun. I'll leave it here, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Hamdi. That was a very excellent expose of the situation in Sudan. In the very short time, you were able to tell us exactly what is happening in Sudan. But as you said, this is just one side of the story. An independent analyst sitting in the UK telling us something. We would like to hear it from the mouth of His Excellency, the Ambassador of Sudan to Pakistan. What has he got to say? Has he got an official mandate from his government, or his loyalties are divided? Thank you very much, sir.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much, and I thank Mr. Al-Hamdi very much for his very comprehensive statement. And I hope to give you good background about the conflict in Sudan now. And at the end, inshallah, you will know exactly what is happening and what is the reason of this crisis. Sudan now is passing through a very complex crisis. It started by the attempted coup staged by the dissolved Rapid Support Forces on the 15th of April last month, which turned into rebellion. The Rapid Support Forces launched treacherous attacks against the Sudanese armed forces bases including the residence of General Al-Burhan, and also the premises of the Army's General Command in Khartoum and Khartoum Airport and other vital and strategic centers in Khartoum. Also, it simultaneously attacked several military headquarters and airports in different states, including Marawi International Airport in northern Sudan. Immediately following the start of the attack, the chairman of the Transitional Sovereign Council and the commander of the armed forces, Lieutenant Fattah Al-Burhan, issued a decree dissolving the Rapid Support Forces, declaring it as a rebel force. At the same time, General Burhan urged the members of the Rapid Support Forces to listen to the voice of reason and lay down their weapons, declaring general amnesty to those who put down arms, assuring that the doors are still open for members of the RSF to join the Sudanese armed forces. It is important to mention that many actions preceded the treacherous attack clearly disclose the intention of the commander of the dissolved rapid forces to seize power by force. One of these is that the rapid support forces brought tens of thousands of its troops in Khartoum. The coordinated attack, also one of these actions, is the coordinated attack by the rapid support forces on Al-Burhan residence in Khartoum. Also, they attack the Khartoum airport and Marawi airport without the knowledge or permission of the armed forces command. Also, they insisted on non-objective conditions regarding the integration of the rapid support forces into the national army, such as not being subordinate to the presidency of the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. And also they insisted to complete the merger process in 10 years. And this is, of course, is very clear sign that they do not intend to complete this integration in the armed forces. All this confirms that the commander of the dissolved rapid support forces was planning and coordinating to coup against the armed forces. The Sudanese armed forces were able to repulse the attacks, inflicting heavy casualties and losses in the RSF, destroying their bases in Khartoum state, besides seizing their bases in the different states in Sudan. The Sudanese armed forces were able to seize bases and cut off their supply lines, a fact that pushed the RSF rebels to hide in residential areas and take civilians as human shields in violations to the local laws and the international humanitarian law. The dissolved rapid support forces have also been violating all norms and international laws by attacking several foreign missions accredited to Sudan, including the embassies of Saudi Arabia, Russia, Malaysia, Egypt, many other embassies, occupying hospitals, killing civilians. Also, the rapid support forces have also been committing a widespread looting, and this show very clearly the negative effect on the life of the civilians in Khartoum. In response to the foreign mediation, the command of the Sudanese armed forces accepted many truces proposed by regional and international community to open humanitarian corridors and enable the citizens to ensure their daily basic needs. However, the dissolved rapid support forces used to take advantage of the truces to mobilize their forces and strengthen their positions in the capital Khartoum. The rapid support forces also assaulted the Sudanese armed forces personnel by its snipers positioned in different locations in Khartoum. Furthermore, the rapid support forces rebels used to disguise in civilian clothes and in Sudanese armed forces and police uniform so as to commit their crimes. In the framework of its plan to spread chaos and threaten the security and safety of the citizens, the dissolved rapid support forces broke into the prisons of Khartoum and other states and allowed thousands of inmates, including those convicted with death penalty, to escape. On the other side, the Sudanese armed forces adopt a strategy that allows limited and responsible use of force in compliance with the international laws and norms. In such circumstances, to ensure the safety and security of the citizens and protect the infrastructure and the Sudanese people gains from destruction. The Sudanese government considers it is fighting. This is very important to mention, that the Sudanese government considers it is fighting against the rapid support forces as internal issue, where foreign intervention is neither acceptable nor tolerable. The Sudanese armed forces are living up to its constitutional role in protecting the Sudanese people. This is the most important thing, should be known by all people, I think. The Sudanese government calls on the international community. This is what we want from the international community, especially from Pakistan, who is a very brotherly country to Sudan. The Sudanese government calls on the international community to denounce this rebellion and the crimes being committed by the dissolved rapid support forces, and also their attempts to seize power by illegal means and their violations against the unarmed civilians in obvious violation to the international norms and laws. Is there any foreign factor in the current crisis in Sudan? This is a question maybe raised by many people. I can say Sudan have experienced foreign intervention in its internal affairs since the early days of its independence. I think this everyone who follows up the history of Sudan can easily know this fact. This intervention is clear in all rebellion movements occurred in Sudan since 1955, even before the independence of Sudan, till this last rebellion by the rapid support forces. Definitely many foreign powers may have played crucial roles in what is happening now. Now everyone may be hear about what is happening in Sudan and who is behind it from the foreign powers. And every day, inshallah, people will know exactly who is behind it. Although now it is not, if it is not easy now to say exactly who is that behind the crisis in Sudan, but inshallah by days it will be very clear. many foreign powers may have role in this what happening now in Sudan, so as to benefit from the weakness or the failure of Sudan. Maybe this is one of the reasons why foreign powers every time try to intervene in Sudan. As an example for the foreign intervention in Sudan, I want to quote what Avi Dichter, the Israeli former Interior Security Minister, once said in a lecture in 2008. He said, "We had to weaken Sudan and deprive it of the initiative to build a strong and united state. What is necessary for bolstering and strengthening Israel's national security. We produced and escalated the Darfur crisis to prevent Sudan from developing its capabilities." This is the end of his quote. So it is clear maybe who could be behind what is happening now in Sudan. I don't mean only one country, but maybe many. But this is an example of who may be behind what is happening now in Sudan and why. The same minister talked about the Israelis' role in separating South Sudan in 2011 by helping the rebels at that time. International impacts of Sudan's crisis. I think there, inshallah, I don't hope that to happen, but if this crisis does not finish very quickly and soon, it would have many impacts on international, at the international level or even at the regional level. And I can say that the existence of the dissolved rapid support forces represent a great threat not to the stability and any possibility for democratic transition in Sudan, but to the peace and security and development of the whole region around Sudan and maybe even far from Sudan. Also, I can say the spread of arms, one of the impacts of the continuance of this crisis, may cause also spread of arms and armed conflicts in the whole region, because this will not be short only in Sudan, because all African countries, especially the countries neighboring Sudan, have the same circumstances which can help same thing to happen. Also, one of the things could happen by the continuance of this crisis, the increase of displacement and illegal immigration, and the consequences of these problems. Also may be an increase of international organized crime. Also, I can say the continuous will cause very clear deterioration of the humanitarian and health situations in the region, not only in the Sudan. Why intervention in Sudan? I think many people do not know Sudan very well, and so they may ask themselves why intervention in Sudan? Why every time Sudan is not allowed to deal with its issues alone? I think all foreign powers who intervene in Sudan's internal affairs are pushed by their greed in the Sudan's capabilities and resources. I think you all know that Sudan is very rich, is a very rich country, rich of its resources, the arable lands, water, different climates, very, very huge livestock, the different minerals. All these are in Sudan, alhamdulillah, and I think many are pushed to have control of these resources. And we all know, sorry, and we all know now the problem which may face the world, the problem of food insecurity, and we know about the effect of the Russian-Ukrainian war. And Sudan is one of the countries that can play a very, very important role in the field of food security. So many countries may have agreed to come to Sudan to have their share on this in this field. Also, Sudan is a very rich country with tourism. We have forests, we have deserts, 5 river Niles. We have very old and diverse civilization. The pyramids, many people do not know that the pyramids in Sudan are more than anywhere in the world. We have more than 200 pyramids, older than any pyramids in the world. So Sudan is very rich. Also, we don't neglect the very important geopolitical and geostrategic location of Sudan. Sudan is bordering 7 closed countries. This is very important. It has a shore on the Red Sea, about 800 kilometers. So Sudan is like a gateway to Africa. No other country in Africa has this advantage. Also, the most important thing for me in Sudan is the most important resource is the human resource, the Sudanese people, alhamdulillah. I want to conclude that the crisis in Sudan, just I want to give hope to people that this crisis, inshallah, can be changed into opportunities just by achieving sustainable peace and stability. And this, inshallah, will be soon, because all Sudanese people are backing their government and their armed forces. And also, we need to have a smooth transition to democracy and civil governance. And I want to also to assure that General Burhan, the president of the Sudan now, the Sovereignty Council, many times promised and committed himself to the transition to the democratic and civil transition in Sudan. Many people may hear that Mr. Hameti, as Mr. Al-Hamidi mentioned, many times talk about that he is willing to help Sudanese people to move to democracy, as if Al-Burhan is against this, which is wrong. Al-Burhan committed many times that if civil parties reached an agreement at any time, he will leave the scene and let them rule. But unfortunately, I think as Mr. Al-Hamdi mentioned, because the political parties, and not, when I say political parties, I talk about very, very small groups, very small number of political parties. They did not like to reach an agreement to have a transitional period, reasonable transitional period to go to the elections, because they know, as he mentioned, that they know very well that by elections they will not come back to rule at all. And this, I think this is the indirect reason of the crisis now, because this the reason made the rapid support forces to insist on having 10 years to complete the their emerge in the armed forces. I would also like to assure that Sudan's doors, this is very important also to me, because many people, as I mentioned, are greed to dominate the Sudanese resources by any way. So I say Sudan's doors are open for whoever likes to benefit from investment opportunities available in Sudan in different fields. So no need for these people to come through windows. Also, I would like to remind that Sudan now needs humanitarian support. This is also, I think, very important for our brothers in Pakistan to know. Sudan is in need of humanitarian support, especially life-saving medicines and medical supplies, and this to be coordinated at bilateral relations, bilateral level, so as to avoid undesirable aspects of international humanitarian aid. And thank you for listening. Jazakumullah khair.
Thank you, Ambassador, for giving us the official position of your government. Very sad whatever is happening, and inshallah, as you say, that the conflict would be resolved soon and normality would return to Sudan. Next, we have our Director, Research and Academics, Outreach, IPS, Professor Dr. Fakhrul Islam. Dr. Fakhrul Islam, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. In fact, I'm not an expert on Africa. Moreover, after the thought-provoking presentation by Mr. Sami Hamdi and the expert opinion given by His Excellency Saleh Muhammad Ahmad Muhammad Sadiq, the Ambassador of Sudan to the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. So both of them have left any room for me to add something. And if there is any gap, we have three more experts and foreign policy practitioners: Ambassador Imran Yawar Sahib, Ambassador Manzoor Haq Sahib, he is online, and Ambassador Abrar Hussain Sahib, the Vice Chairman of Institute of Policy Studies. But I will definitely refer to the Quranic verses recited by the gentleman in the recorded recitation from the Holy Quran, which enjoins upon the believers to reconciliate between the warring parties of the Muslims. It is because all the Muslims belong to a universal Muslim brotherhood. Although IEPS cannot stop this war, but at least by holding this program, IEPS has helped in creating awareness about the issue and hopefully this will go a long way to give a food for thought for resolving this conflict. With this, I conclude here to give opportunity to the other excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to express their views. Fi amanillah.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. And next we have Ambassador Imran Yawar Saab. He's served extensively in our missions in Africa, and he is, as far as I'm concerned, an expert in the area. Over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me commend the efforts of IPS on holding this seminar on Sudan, which is going through a phase which is tragic. And we feel for the people of Sudan, and we hope that peace comes there soon. Ambassador, without trying to rebut your official position, I would like to say that if you want to understand Sudan, the most important thing is its geostrategic location. That is where it is located. As the Ambassador also said, it has about 800 plus kilometers of coast with Red Sea. And Red Sea, as we again know, that it's a very important sea lane, and particularly because of the Iranian influence in the Persian Gulf. And any blockage of Red Sea would mean that the ships which go from Arabian Sea to Gulf of Aden and to the Mediterranean, they will have to be rerouted, and they'll have to have another 4,000 kilometers, and then they through Cape of Good Hope. So from that point of view, this Red Sea lane of Bab el-Mandab Strait is very, very important. And Sudan is sitting on that. As the Ambassador said, rightly said, it is the gateway to Africa. And a lot of countries, Arab countries and African countries, they have an interest in the Red Sea, particularly, so if I may be allowed to name the countries as well, UAE and Saudi Arabia, they have most important interest in maintaining their influence. You see, in the Red Sea, in the littoral states at the moment, there are about 13 bases in 4 countries. That is Sudan, and that is Eritrea, Djibouti, Somalia, Somaliland, Puntland. So there are about 13 bases. So this shows you the importance of this lane to this to the Arabs. And this importance increased when this Yemen war started. The bases in Eritrea and particularly were used by UAE to bomb the Yemenis, the Houthis. So one thing is that. Second thing is the natural resources of Sudan. Sudan is 4th largest producer of gold. It is producer of uranium. It has uranium. It has petroleum. So it is very, very important from that point of view. Plus, as the Ambassador again said, it has it is rich in arable land, particularly in the south towards what it is called as Fashaga. That's right, Ambassador, Fashaga border. So it is very rich. Now, you have to keep in mind to see how things unfolded. Now, when Mr. Umar al-Bashir was removed from power, it was because in 2017, he had refused to accept the Saudis and the UAE conditions that they should oust Qatar, when Qatar blockade had already started, and Turkey. They were both very strong. They had their presence in Sudan. And there, Turkey has a base in Suakin, plus Turkey is building bases in Khartoum, where it is training the soldiers of the Sudanese army. So, and plus they are again, the Turks are doing humanitarian work quite a lot. So UAE and Saudi Arabia, they wanted the Turks to get out, to be thrown out, and Qatar as well. When Mr. Bashir refused, of course, then the sanctions started, and the sanctions were most pungent when from Saudi Arabia and UAE. Of course, there was a political uprising, and I believe that the political uprising which led to the ouster of Mr. Umar al-Bashir was the rising of the people of Sudan. The people of Sudan wanted to be part of the system, as Mr. Hamdi said, that people of Sudan showed vigor, and I think that was very important. But then, when the forces to be, particularly the regional forces, realized that things may get out of the hand, because they were investing quite a lot in it. So that's when the army stepped in. And of course, Mr. Tagalo and the Hamiti and General Burhan, they collaborated in the ouster of Umar al-Bashir. And mind it, Umar al-Bashir had the backing of Islamic Brotherhood. Now, when this thing happened, Saudis and UAE, they started pumping in the money. And in 2022, I think, yes, and the UAE signed an agreement for the development of a port, which is called as Abu Imama Port, which is about near port of Port Sudan, at a price of $6 billion. And it's a huge project, which included agriculture, airport, roads, everything. Saudi Arabia also last year agreed to pump in about $3 billion. So you see, these countries started pumping in dollars. The reason was they had to have their influence in Sudan. They had to have their influence in little states of Red Sea. Therefore, unless and until these countries agree not to intervene in the affairs of Sudan, peace cannot return. Now, we have these two gentlemen, General Burhan and Hamadan Tagalo, General Tagalo. They are fighting. You see the background of Mr. Tagalo. He has been held responsible for committing atrocities in Darfur region. Now, Mr. Burhan also, Ambassador, I'm not sure, but this is what it is said, that Mr. Burhan also is connected to those atrocities. And now for these two gentlemen, it's the question of survival, because both of them since they've by the ICC, they're held responsible for this, and they can be arrested on these account. Now, for the peace to come, as I said, the countries which are involved, they have to reduce the involvement. Libya has been providing them arms. Mr. General Haftar has been a very close ally of Hamadan Dagalo. Therefore, they have been providing arms. They are still providing arms. You come to Egypt. Egypt has resounding interest in Sudan. Therefore, since it is army, they are supporting the army under General Burhan. They have the armies of the two countries are very close to each other, and in fact, Egypt has a base which is considered to be the largest military base in a city called Bernice, which is about 300 kilometers to the Sudanese border. And before this thing happened, they were conducting exercises which were called as guardians of Nile. The reason being, Egypt has problems with Ethiopia regarding their Grand Renaissance Dam. So Egypt would want to have a very close relationship with Sudan, and they think that Mr. Burhan or General Burhan provides that ideal opportunity, ideal background. And in fact, it is under General Burhan that relationship between Sudan and Ethiopia also deteriorated because of this Fashaga border dispute which these two countries have. So this is one thing. Of course, Egypt again is concerned about Islamic Brotherhood, and it's very interesting that Egypt has close ties with General Burhan, and General Burhan has the backing of Islamic Brotherhood. So this is quite ironical for Egypt. as I said, UAE, of course, they have the huge investments plus their interest in the influence, increasing their influence in the Red Sea region. Saudi Arabia, which is by far the largest country, literal country of the Red Sea, it has a very important role there. Mind it, Saudi Arabia in 2020 set up the Red Sea Council. The purpose of this Red Sea Council was to increase its influence among the littoral states. It has 8 members. You come to, of course, UAE, as I've already said, Egypt, I've already explained. So these countries, and of course, Ethiopia is another country which has a border with Sudan, and for a long time they had very good, and even under Umar al-Bashir, they had very good relations. Now, at the moment, they have some tensions between the two countries. And that is, as I said, because of the Grand Renaissance Dam. Egypt believes that the agreement between Egypt and Ethiopia on Grand Renaissance does not exist. Egypt goes after the treaty which it signed in 1959 with the UK, under which I think 70% of the share of Nile water had to be given to Egypt, and then next rest to Sudan. And then there was another agreement signed between Sudan and Egypt which ignored Ethiopia. So Ethiopia is now asserting its right to the use of Blue Nile, which originates from Lake Tana in South Korea. Now, just to conclude on how this problem is to be resolved, I think this problem will only be resolved if, number one, the foreign actors stop interfering in the affairs of Sudan, which means stop providing arms, whether it is or political support or military support, any support. This problem, African problem, has to be resolved by Africa itself, and that is they have organizations which can do this, like IGAD, Intergovernment Authority for Development. It's a very solid, very strong thing. Then, of course, there's AAU. So these are the two bodies which can play an important role in resolving this dispute. US, UK, they have their interests. For me, I have been in the region, I have seen these things. I do not think Americans or British are interested in resolving the issues. If they were interested, you would not have found things as they were bad. You start from Mali in the north, Mauritania, and come down. Anywhere you see Central African republics, you see Democratic Republic of Congo, whatever you see, you find footprints of Americans, you find footprints of British, you find footprints of French. Europeans will never be, they were the masters, they were the colonizers. So they are not interested in seeing these countries come out. And the problem which these countries are facing is because of their divisions. I think African problems must be resolved by Africa itself, not by anything, and least by Arab countries. They have no role to play in this thing. Thank you very much.
That was a tour de force. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. So next on the list, we have got Ambassador Manzoor al-Haq. Ambassador Saab, the floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you. First of all, I would appreciate this Institute for Policy Studies for organizing this very important webinar. And it's really, Sudan is a country which is very close to our heart. And we are really disturbed when we see bad news coming from Sudan. And we hope that the situation will not go on for a long time. Listening to very elaborate explanation and elaboration of the situation in Sudan, I would just look to this issue from a different perspective. Ambassador Imran Yawar has explained elaborately the region and the countries. Also, Ambassador Saleh has mentioned that there is the involvement from outside. In a very general way, if I can say that the situation in Sudan is at least the region or its 7 neighbors, they all have a stake in the stability of Sudan. If Sudan is stable, they would be strong and they would be happy and they would be progressing. Sudan's situation, if it goes out of control, then the countries around Sudan will not be at ease. For example, we see in the situation in Libya. In Libya, there are two governments. The situation is not as good as it should be. We see that the Ethiopia has sorted out this, made a peace with the Tigray region. Also, the Chad has a lot of refugees. It has economic issues if the number of refugees increases. So is Central African Republic and also the Eritrea. So, I mean, all these countries should be working, are interested in the stability of Sudan, because peaceful Sudan is to their benefit. And similarly, for the region, if there is a problem in Sudan, the Red Sea or the shipping lane would suffer. So that is a very important place. And as Ambassador Yawar said, 4,040 kilometers is saved when you are crossing the Red Sea through the Suez Canal. So a lot of trade is taking place through the Red Sea. This is very important. And it gives Sudan an additional importance. Its resources, of course, is also is very important. Then the situation, if we see that these the region and all these, I mean, they would benefit from having a stable and peaceful Sudan. So therefore, we hope to see that all these countries play their role. And the positive or the encouraging factor is that Sudan, the South Sudan, which has a long history of hostility or civil war or whatever, but they are working to reach a ceasefire or to make the situation calm down. So I mean, all these regional countries or all these neighbors can play their role in it. Then there is another factor which I would like the ambassador of Sudan to comment on. That's my feeling is that the situation in Sudan, some say that Sudan is a big country and it is going to be, this conflict is going to get out of control. It's going to divide the country, as we see in some countries, or the neighboring countries, Libya, for example. But in Sudan, the ethnic fault lines are not that deep in my view. There are more than 500 ethnic groups in Sudan. But if we see the situation which is going on, it does not give any indication of having any ethnic dimension to it or any tribal dimension to it. Sudan has a trouble in Darfur region for quite some time, but even in Darfur region, if you see the different tribes, it does not show that they are fighting or they are hostile to one another or they are in the involved in the conflict on the ethnic and tribal lines. So Ambassador Saleh would know that, and I think that is a positive thing about Sudan, that even if there is resentment in certain parts of Sudan against the government, and that happens, economy, the capital and the periphery and all these, but those are localized and those do not spread throughout the country or do not make one group against another group. This is the strong point or the positive point where we could be able to bring about peace in Sudan. There is another factor that we always think that Sudan has been throughout its history, more than 50 years, it has been more than 70 years, it has been in problems and it has been under a dictatorial autocratic rule. But Sudan has seen democratic rules as well. Sudan has seen certain period of time when there were elections. Even the independence of Sudan was peaceful, and there were elections. And when the flag of Sudan was raised on 1st January 1957, the Prime Minister Ismail Azhari was he was having the opposition leader Muhammad Ahmad Mahjoub on his side. This is a very positive indication, and it shows that how democratic the Sudanese people are and how tolerant they are. Whenever they are given a choice, they have been very sensible. They are very political in their thinking. They are very political in their temperament. And they, even despite the ban on political activities, they were very political. And there were jokes when 1990s or 1999, the people would say that Sudan problem is that there are 29 million politicians in Sudan. Now there are, one can say, more than 40 million politicians in Sudan. They are politically, they have very political temperament, and they know how to play, how to go about politics, how to vote, and how to elect. They have this experience of democratic representative governments. And there is another example, I think a very rare example, which we cannot find perhaps in many other places. That is the example of General Abdurrahman Sawarud-Dahab. General Abdurrahman Sawarud-Dahab in 1985, he came, he took over the government, he conducted a free, fair elections, and he handed over the power to a civilian elected representative government in Sudan. So I think Sudan has this tradition of democratic institutions and parliaments. We can say that if the people are given the right to choose, perhaps they will be able to make decisions, and they would be able to go through this transition in a very positive manner. At this point, I would refer to Mr. Sami Hamdi's point of view, that he says that there is a fear that if elections are held, there would be a certain party winning the election. I don't know exactly if it would be that easy to predict, because in the countries he has mentioned, like Egypt, like Tunisia, those parties which won elections after the revolution were the parties which remained in a position for a very long time. So in Sudan, the case was different. The case, this party remained in government for quite some time. So there is, it is a different situation. I don't know, how it could take place, and whether it could take place as he thought about it, or he says that the people are thinking about it. But there is a very striking difference in the two. In one case, in Egypt, the party was in the opposition for such a long time. In the case of Sudan, it was 30 years. 30 years in the government. So I would conclude by saying that the situation in Sudan is, of course, it's disturbing, and we all are concerned, but we hope and see that there are positive things also, and the people of Sudan have the capacity and capability to deal with their problems. And as Ambassador Imran Yawar said, African solution to the African problems, and we hope for the best for Sudan, and we hope this conflict come to an end sooner than later. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. And the interesting thing is, all the speakers, without any exception, have ended on a positive note, including yourself, Ambassador. All of you have said that, God willing, there will be peace in Sudan. But I think a lot of work will have to go into bringing peace, because peace is a very elusive commodity, and it requires effort from all sides. And when there is a civil war kind of situation, it is even more difficult. So I think there was some very eminent speaker. I stand educated. I learned a lot about Sudan, although I've been studying about Sudan for a very long time as a young military officer. We studied the campaigns in Sudan, Mehdi Sudani and Mr. Churchill and Battle of Omdurman and Kitchener and people like that. So Sudan has always been a focus of international forces. International forces have trying to be making inroads into this very important geostrategic area. They have had successes, but in the end, I think the success should go to the Sudanese people. So the house is now open. We have people online and people here in this room. So how do we go about it? Nofal Saab, do we invite questions from people online first? So can you raise your hands? You tell me if who wants to ask a question. Okay, we take a question for this gentleman. Okay.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Just I want to comment on Excellency Manzoor, which he has mentioned, that is the element of ethnic dimension. I will ensure Excellency and the listeners the blessing of this let us fighting with each other groups, no any dimension of ethnic elements in this conflict which is going on, and this is very important. Whenever you try to study the other country, including our neighbors, whenever there is two leaders or two rebels, they are fighting each other, you find the civilians taking sides to each other. That is now no any signal of these elements and dimension in this fighting going between two groups. And this is maybe the background of Sudanese. As you mentioned, they is very rich according to practicing the political, what you can say, interests and activities and so on. So we are, in this regard, we are safe, alhamdulillah. And if you also look to the people arguing each others nowadays, they are not talking at all, Sudanese people I mean, they are not talking at all about ethnics, about what you can say, people, tribes or tribalism or some such kind of this. So this is, I will assure you and the listeners, we have no any ethnic dimension in this fighting. And this is which is makes the solution easable for others if they want to help. We have no this very dangerous elements to make people take side here and there, and we are safe. Just people used to absorb as well as used to estimate unpacking the national army, not according to the tribal or ethnics we have in this. I will ensure you and others as well, and this is our blessing to just civilian be far away from what is going on and just making pray to save the land and people and so on. Thank you.
But there was conflict in Darfur, which is ethnic based. You had Janjaweed fighting the...
Yeah, there is many reasons someone can justify that what is was happened. Yeah.
They emerged, they were basically non-Arabs, which were in the south of Darfur.
Yeah, and that is backing by international stakeholders as well. There is such a dimension of
I say that because you still have UN peacekeeping forces, including Pakistanis in Darfur, so situation is not stabilized.
Yeah, because
Yeah, because of the recent crisis, things are, is a far vacuum in Darfur at this moment. The army is there, and the Janjaweeds or the Rebel Support Force is there. So that has left a vacuum, and in that vacuum, there emerged these militias, new tribal chiefs.
Yeah.
They are now fighting with each other.
Fighting or talking?
No, not talking. They're fighting. There is trouble in Darfur at the moment.
Yeah, it is a rare incidence which is linking to tribalism. But as whole, you cannot just conclude that is fighting according to any ethnic dimension. So why now the people, they are not, they have no any role in this, what is going on, and they are far away. Even the others, they are estimate that is maybe the people, they coming to fight each other, they coming to back one side to against another, but this is not happen, and we hope it will be not happen as well.
So Anila has raised her hand for a very long time. Anila, please ask your question, and also tell us whom do you want to answer this question.
Yes. Can you hear me? Is my voice clear over there?
जी अनिला आपको सुन सकते हैं हम आपको.
जी मैं अनिला शहजाद हूँ, मैं ऑथर हूँ, जियोपॉलिटिक्स पे लिखती हूँ. अच्छा, the question is for the ambassador or maybe for Sami Hamdi, because there have been reports very recently that the US is increasing its force in Djibouti, and also there are news that the Russians are going to increase their Wagner Group's presence in Sudan under this thing of evacuation because people are coming and going. So and also in the context that Mr. Hamadouk, who was put in inside the transition government, was also some analysts say a puppet of the US. So please, you need to comment that what is the role of the US and the Russians in this whole conflict, and how do you think that they can dominate? I mean, it looks like that they want to dominate the whole scenario. So,
Thank you, Anila. Role of US, Ambassador.
Yes. And Russia.
Role of US and the Wagner Group. You're talking about the private military contractors of Wagner. Russia is not there.
So maybe Ambassador can respond to all the questions in one go. First, let them.
Okay. So our vice. Sorry.
Yes. Okay.
अभी जवाब दें क्लब करके.
Want to respond now? Or?
You want them to club together or what?
Okay, if I can answer
The role of US and Russia. That's what the lady is asking in Sudan.
Okay, the question is related also to the importance of the Red Sea as the most important sea line. So I can say the presence of the United States in the Red Sea is not new. Already they have a base in Djibouti, which has more than 12 military bases. And when they declared that they will send, I think about 400 troops or something like that, they linked this to the evacuation of their citizens in Sudan. Otherwise, Sudan shores are not open for anyone to come just like this. They said they will come to the Red Sea to help their citizens in Sudan to be evacuated to their country. Also, regarding Wagner, I don't think we have this organization in Sudan, but definitely they are with Hemeti now. They are with the Arab support forces. But in Sudan, as government, we don't have any relation with this organization. And if you allow me to continue to give some comments on what he said, I would also like to mention that, as said, Sudanese people are very educated, enlightened, and very, very capable to deal with their issues. So I don't think they will allow anyone, whoever, to intervene in their internal matters. And maybe what is happening now is a response to who are trying to intervene in Sudan. What is mentioned about what was said about Burhan as convicted by the ICC is not correct, because Al-Burhan traveled to Britain, he traveled to America, nothing like that said about him at all. Also, what is said about the African solution is correct, because now, Alhamdulillah, in the UN Security Council, the African Union, and the Arab League all are confirming that no intervention in Sudan, and they all agree that the solution of the Sudanese crisis should be by Sudanese people, or otherwise be by the African, because African problems should be treated by African people, because they know their problems and how to deal with them better than anyone else. Also, it is mentioned that this crisis should be, inshallah, resolved very quickly. Inshallah, I assure that it will be very quickly finished, unless negative intervention happened from here or there. And regarding the ethnic dimension in what is happening now, and also in Darfur, I assure there is no any kind of ethnic dimension, because all people in Sudan, with their different tribes, different ideologies, all are behind their military. And I think this comes to some people because many unfair media used to talk about this issue. And I can tell you that now even Hemeti, the commander of the Arabic Support Forces, is isolated even by his tribe. His own tribe refused what he's doing now. So I hope nobody will worry about any kind of ethnic or tribal dimension in what is happening in Sudan. Also, I want to reaffirm that what is happening now in Sudan is a military coup. Everyone in Sudan knows this. And because of that, all Sudanese people are behind their military. And maybe some are confused because of what Hemeti used to say after his crime, and he's trying to help the democratic transition in Sudan and something like this. All people know and very sure that he is lying. Also, he is mentioning something strange also, that he is trying to fight the military because many Islamic elements and old maybe Islamic political figures are supporting him. Also, this is very wrong, because the people or the soldiers who are after the overthrow of al-Bashir, many I cannot say they are Islamic but everyone who is dropped from the military used to be recruited by Hemeti himself in the rapid support forces. So now he says about the Islamic or the Islamist in the military and supporting Burhan, while he's if we come to see, we find the people who are accused of their ideology, even Islamic or any, he used to bring them with him. So I hope all what is said by the media not to be to believe in. I hope that, inshallah. Thank you very much.
Any more questions from the House before Ambassador Ibrahim wraps it up? No one? Say, Hamdi, Mr. Hamdi, would you like to comment on it? On what the ambassador has just said?
Thank you. I know Anila, she mentioned a couple of questions. I think what's worth noting is when the ambassador insists that this is the army versus an attempted coup, I think he's absolutely spot on this. I think that the easiest way to explain it for those who are listening in Pakistan or anywhere else is to consider that if you would accept a lieutenant general of any faction within the army itself trying to launch a coup on the main national army institution, not a single Pakistani would accept it, not a single state would accept it, and not a single national institution or Pakistani would accept a mediation between a faction and between the national army that seeks to cement some sort of independence for this militia or this faction outside the control of the army. And this is why it's sort of irrelevant largely what people may think of General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, because this is not Abdel Fattah al-Burhan versus Hemeti. This is the Sudanese army versus Hemeti's bid to subjugate the army and topple Abdel Fattah al-Burhan to seize power for himself. This is about trying to sideline the national army in favor of a militia, and it's something that no nation would accept. I think that when it comes to comments on the US or indeed with regards to Russia, it's important to note that Israeli politicians in their memoirs, as His Excellency the Ambassador mentioned, Israeli politicians in their memoirs are very open about Sudan. They're very open about insisting that we put pressure on Washington, or we demanded from Washington that they impose sanctions on Sudan, that they squeeze Sudan, that they pressure Sudan, because it was a haven for Islamic causes, because it was a haven for the Palestinian resistance against the Israelis, because it was a haven for Islamic thought. This is why when you look at what they are saying, what the US officials are saying, what the US wants in Sudan is a transition process that removes the Islamic identity of Sudan. What the Sudanese army is saying is that we don't want to remove the identity. Let's talk about other terms of rehabilitation. The response of the US is, if the army insists on preserving these ideological aspects of Sudan, we demand the handover of power to a civilian group that is of a particular ideology that promises to enact these ideological changes that we want. That's why the US assertion in Sudan is not elections, it's not a democratic transition. The US assertion is the unilateral handover of power from the army to these minority political groups, and the US guarantees support for these groups to embark on ideological changes, because the Sudanese, from the Washington's perspective, cannot be trusted to vote. Anybody who reads the New York Times article called The Dark Prince of the UAE, it's a very extensive article published. Many of you have already read it. But if you notice that the argument that the UAE presents to Washington is a very simple one. Bin Zayed says in the article to US officials that if a man was to stand up in Mecca and say, I am the Mahdi, or I am going to bring Islamic rule, 80% of the UAE army would go to join them. Bin Zayed argues that Muslim populations in the Muslim world in democratic elections always tend to lean to vote for Islamic-leaning parties. It's not about the Muslim Brotherhood or the Islamists. What Washington is concerned that the sanctions that were supposed to achieve ideological changes are going to be ruined by a Sudanese population that in democratic elections will not vote for leftists, will not vote for communists. It's not that they will vote for al-Bashir or they will vote for Islamists, but they will vote for people who are proud of this Islamic identity. And that's why there should be an imposition of a transition process that promises this. And that's why Hemeti is saying his main argument for his coup is, I am fighting Islamists, because for Hemeti, he knows that for the international community, this is what will evoke resonance. And this is why I go to the point about why this transition process, this is what the US wants to achieve. It's less about the Red Sea and more about finally imposing these ideological changes on a Sudan that has demanded to be independent of Washington and has been punished for that by US support for South Sudan, by international support for the Darfur rebel movement, by blowing up oil pipelines in the east of Sudan to put pressure on this government in Sudan that seeks to be independent of some of these international machinations. And this is why, going back to what the ambassador said, it's important to conclude on this point. It's easy to look at Sudan as both sidism, as two factions fighting one another. But those who argue that it is two factions fighting one another neglect that the consequences of the Sudanese army versus the consequences of Hemeti winning are two very different consequences. If General Abdel Fattah Burhan wins and the Sudanese army wins, Sudan has greater independence to dictate its future. If Hemeti wins, Hemeti is promising to hand over Sudan to abide by these changes that are trying to be imposed externally on a population that doesn't want it. And this is why the Sudanese are standing by the army. It's not about whether it's Burhan or not Burhan. The Sudanese are standing behind their army because they realize that what Hemeti is threatening is the disintegration of the very institution that has preserved the territorial integrity of Sudan. And that's why, to conclude on this point, is to say that, look, when you are observing Sudan and what's happening, you don't have to like the parties involved, but you have to be aware of the consequences of what happens if one party wins over another. Right now, there is a push for mediation between Hemeti and between Burhan. But I ask everybody sitting in the room in Islamabad and every Pakistani paying attention, would you accept your chief of staff general sitting with a rebel militia faction on the basis that that militia will be allowed to operate independently of the army? The only mediation that works is one that guarantees the merger of Hemeti's forces and the army, one that guarantees the preservation of a single armed forces institution, not a mediation that allows Hemeti to continue controlling a force that is run by him and his older brother Abdurrahman. The point is this, in that if you as a Pakistani are willing to accept two armed forces in Pakistan because this is the reconciliation that you want, then you will accept a mediation with Hemeti. If you wouldn't accept this mediation and you value the army, the Pakistani army and the institution and the unity of that institution as the guard for Pakistan, you will not demand that Burhan mediates with Hemeti unless Hemeti agrees to hand over his militia to the control of the army. I think that's the crux of the issue. It's not about Burhan and Hemeti, it's about the integrity of the Sudanese army, and Sudanese will have devastating consequences if the army is forced to give up its integrity because the UAE and Washington want Hemeti to impose ideological changes that the Sudanese do not want.
Mr. Hamdi, very powerful, very powerful arguments, and I will use these arguments with my friends who sometimes talk ill of our own army. So thank you very much over there. Sir, I would like you to wrap it up.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, let me thank all the speakers who enlightened us today about the situation in Sudan. I'm especially thankful to Mr. Sami Hamdi al-Hashmi and Ambassador of Sudan, Mr. Saleh Siddiq. Well, most of the speakers were very candid, and let me say that there were many things that I myself didn't know before this seminar, and have learned a lot from the speeches, the interventions made here today. Well, Mr. Sami Hamdi told us about immediate reasons, but also in detail about the contextual reasons. And that was something very important. Most of us perhaps didn't know about the contextual reason in such a detail. Then Ambassador Saleh Siddiq told us about his side of the story, about the official version, and he told us that it will be soon clear that who is behind this crisis. he also told us that Sudan is an attractive country. It attracts not only tourists, but also foreign interventions because it's rich in resources and because of its geostrategic location and because it's gateway to Africa. There are foreign interventions time and again. Well, Ambassador Imran Yawar, who is an experienced diplomat who has been in Africa for such a long time, told us about the pivotal interest of Saudi Arabia and UAE, who are pumping millions of dollars. He was very candid when giving us details of the background of this crisis. And the crux of his intervention was that stop foreign interventions in Sudan. Well, he talked about resounding interest of Egypt and Libya. Well, now most of us know that RSF, or Rapid Support Force, is supported by Libya, by Libyan National Army, and the Sudanese armed forces led by General Burhan are supported by Egypt. Well, Ambassador Manzoorul Haq rightly said that all neighbors are and should be interested in peace and stability in Sudan. That's very important. He spoke about ethnic fault lines, which are not so prominent, which are not so deep in Sudan. And then Brother Bashir and the Ambassador of Sudan endorsed these views. Well, I think the bottom line was, as Ambassador Saleh told us, that UN and Arab League and Organization of African Unity all agree that solution should come from the people of Sudan and not from the outsiders. There shouldn't be any foreign intervention. So I think the bottom line is that all foreign interventions should stop. And as Brother Sami Hamdi said, that it's up to the people of Sudan. If they are supporting their military, if they are supporting their army, and if they don't want to support a militia and they are behind their army, it's not up to the rest of the world. It's not up to the international community or global community at large to intervene or to pressurize them to come to terms. It's up to the people of Sudan, and we are all sure about it, that people of Sudan will make right decisions in their own interest. And the global community should support the decisions made by the people of Sudan. I once again thank all the speakers, all the participants of today for coming to this seminar. Thank you so much.